There is a machine nobody thinks about. It sits inside an industrial building with no windows, a few miles from wherever you are right now. In every city on Earth where electricity exists, it runs without stopping, every hour of every day, and it moves faster than any commercial aircraft ever has. The hypothesis under investigation. At a given moment, it becomes physically impossible for any man-made object to travel faster than 50 miles per hour without instantly disintegrating. No exceptions, no mechanical workarounds, no materials that hold. Most people who encounter that premise think reasonably about planes, about highways, about cargo ships crossing the Pacific. Those consequences are real, and this investigation will reach them. But they are not the first consequences. They aren't even close. The first consequence happens inside that building with no windows, in the first second of the first day. A standard steam turbine, the kind that generates electricity in nuclear plants, coal plants, and natural gas facilities across every continent, operates at 3,600 rotations per minute. At the tip of its rotor, that rotation translates into a linear velocity of approximately 843 miles per hour. The speed limit under investigation is 50. The machine powering your city is moving at 843. This is not a marginal case. Steam turbines generate the dominant share of the world's electricity. Every nuclear reactor, every coal plant, every major natural gas facility. Gas turbines spin faster still. Wind turbines carry blades with tip velocities reaching 200 miles per hour at full capacity. Under the hypothesis, they all disintegrate simultaneously, in the same second, on the same day. Solar panels are the only major electricity source with no moving parts. In a civilization that spent 150 years building its energy infrastructure around rotation, solar panels represent approximately 5% of global electricity generation. The first consequence of the 50 miles per hour limit is not slower travel. It is the simultaneous destruction of every rotating electricity generator on Earth. Before a single car attempts a highway, before a single plane attempts a runway, everything that follows happens in the dark. The immediate instinct is to reach for alternatives. If rotation is the problem, remove rotation. Convert to solar. The engineering literature discusses this as though it were a transition rather than a replacement. What it rarely acknowledges is the human scale of the loss. Global electricity demand runs at approximately 25,000 terawatt-hours per year. Solar currently supplies around 5% of that figure. The infrastructure supplying the remaining 95% ceases to exist in the first second. Every electrical grid then faces the same physics. Supply and demand must be balanced continuously. Without rotating machines to maintain frequency, automatic protection systems disconnect and the grid collapses entirely. Solar panels generate direct current, while the grid runs on alternating current. Inverters survive intact, but the grid was designed around the natural frequency that rotating machines produce simply by spinning. Remove the rotating machines, and you remove the rhythm around which modern human life is calibrated. Consider what that darkness actually means. The northeastern United States blackout of 2003 affected 55 million people and required 2 weeks for full restoration. That event preserved the entire generation infrastructure. Under the hypothesis, the generation infrastructure does not survive. Rebuilding a damaged grid is an engineering problem. Rebuilding from the physics up, while managing the collapse of telecommunications, water treatment, hospital power, and food distribution, is a different category of human trial entirely. Consider how fragile our daily survival has become. At any given hour, a Toyota assembly plant in Georgetown, Kentucky, holds approximately 4 hours of parts inventory. Not 4 days, 4 hours. Components arrive by truck at precisely timed intervals. The trucks are not simply delivering parts, they are the warehouse. This system has a name, just in time. Built entirely around the elimination of storage, its central insight was that inventory is waste. The solution was to make transportation fast and reliable enough to replace the warehouse entirely. When that system stops, there is no backup buffer, and internal combustion engines cannot carry even a slower version of that load. A standard petrol or diesel engine converts reciprocating piston motion into rotation through a crankshaft. At highway RPM, crankshaft surface velocities exceed 50 miles per hour. Every petrol and diesel vehicle on Earth ceases to function in the same moment the turbines disintegrate because internal components themselves violate the speed limit. What cannot survive is the assumption that civilization's logistics will continue operating at anything approaching current capacity. In 1994, physicist Cesare Marchetti documented a pattern holding across recorded urban history. Regardless of speed, the average person maintains a daily travel time budget of approximately 1 hour, 30 minutes each way, a behavioral constant stable enough across centuries that it reflects human biology rather than culture. When speed increases, human communities spread apart. Roman cities extended to a radius of 2 miles. Victorian cities expanded to 9. American automobile cities, Los Angeles, Houston, extend to radii of 30 miles or more. Remove the speed, and the process runs in reverse. Every city on Earth was sized by its transport speed. Remove the speed, and the city does not merely shrink, it fragments. Families, jobs, medical care, and food sources are isolated into pockets too small to sustain modern specialization. Modern civilization was not built to run at speed. It was built out of speed. Food is where the vulnerability becomes immediate and deeply personal. California produces the majority of America's produce because refrigerated trucking made it possible to grow where conditions were optimal and ship anywhere people lived. Remove the speed, and geography reasserts itself with complete indifference to human need. Urban food security literature estimates that major cities hold between 3 and 5 days of food inventory. The assumption is that supply will resume. Under the hypothesis, supply does not resume. It reorganizes, slowly, painfully, around whatever agricultural capacity exists within a new 30-minute walking or cycling radius. The reorganization is not equal. A city like Des Moines, Iowa, sits inside rich agricultural land. Its relationship with the countryside could, over time, be reconstructed on a local level. A city like Phoenix, Arizona, 1.6 million people built in a desert, sustained entirely by refrigerated trucking, long-distance water pumping, and air conditioning, has no such relationship to reconstruct. The surrounding geography offers no food. The water supply requires electricity that no longer flows. Phoenix is the logical tragic endpoint of a design philosophy that relied on speed for basic survival. Medicine follows the exact same human geography. At 4:47 in the morning, on a Tuesday in October 2018, a surgical team in Chicago received a donor heart that had traveled from another hospital by helicopter. Total transit time, 23 minutes. The patient survived. That outcome was not merely a medical achievement. Everything before the operating room was a race against time, solved purely by velocity. The cold ischemic time of a human heart is 4 to 6 hours. No ground vehicle limited to 50 miles per hour can close continental distances within that biological window. Below a certain velocity, the organ arrives outside the window. The surgery cannot happen. The life cannot be saved. Speed was the invisible cord keeping the patient alive. Now, return to the turbine, not as a metaphor, as the specific machine that opened this investigation before supply chains fractured, before geography determined who receives a donor heart and who does not. Tip velocity, 843 miles per hour. The turbine doesn't spin fast because speed is desirable. It spins fast because electromagnetic induction requires a minimum rate of change in magnetic flux to produce electricity. Speed is a condition of the physics. That same structure appears across every human system examined. The supply chain uses speed because eliminating inventory requires replenishment within a narrow window. The transplant network uses aviation because human organs decay within hours. The city expands because the human travel budget fills to whatever radius speed can reach in 30 minutes. Remove the speed, and what remains is not a slower version of our world. What remains is the physical shell, the silent roads, the dark towers, the unpowered hospitals, of a civilization whose operating system can no longer function. There is a concept in structural engineering called the load-bearing wall. It looks, from the outside, exactly like every other wall. It performs, in ordinary conditions, no visible function that a partition wall does not also perform. The distinction becomes legible only when someone removes it. Speed has been the load-bearing wall of modern human civilization for 150 years. Every system we rely on was built assuming that wall would stand. The hypothesis removes it. What the evidence reveals, through the turbines, through empty store shelves, through isolated cities, through silent operating rooms, is not the fragility of modern life. Fragility implies that a stronger version of the same structure could survive. What the evidence reveals is something far more sobering. Modern civilization is not fragile at 50 miles per hour. It is not operable at 50 miles per hour. Inoperability means our entire way of life was never designed for that reality. The planes were never the critical variable. The critical variable was the rotational velocity of a turbine shaft inside a building with no windows, performing a function so fundamental to human existence that we ceased to notice it at all. That is what the investigation set out to find. It found the load-bearing wall,